Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum to all of you. I hope that you all are fine, happy and fresh. This is your science teacher Muhammad Mashood Khan and we are discussing chapter number 11, that is the environment. Before we start today's lecture, I will call the previous knowledge first. In this chapter, we have discussed about the environment and its factors. Environment is anything that is around you and it includes biotic and abiotic factors. The woodland habitat. We discussed the woodland habitat and we discussed the 4 layers of the woodland habitat. These were the canopy, that is called the tree layer. The next is the shrub layer, the field layer and the ground layer. Then we discussed about the river habitat. Just like in the woodland habitat, we discussed that these 4 layers, the living things which are living in these 4 layers are the habitats of woodland. So the same thing is for the river habitat, that the living things which are living inside the water and river and which are living just aside of the river, on a river bank they are living. So these are the river habitats and they do interact with each other. Then we discussed about the desert habitat. That desert is a place where there is very little rainfall. Sometimes it is very cold and sometimes it's very hot. And we discussed about the animals and plants in the desert. Today we are going to discuss about the food chain. So a food chain is a series of events in which one organism eats another and obtains its energy. Just like in this, the food chain is told that a food chain is a series of events in which organism eats another one. Just like humans obtain their energy by eating some birds and animals. Just like we eat mutton, sheep, we eat goats, we eat some plants also. So we obtain our energy by eating some other living things. So that is in a form of a chain, so that is called a food chain. So a food chain shows one possible path along which energy can move through an ecosystem. So we will discuss this food chain in detail now, that there are 3 parts of the food chain. We say producer, consumer and decomposer. So we will discuss this one by one. But before we go to discuss all these 3, let us see that what food chain is basically. As you can see in the picture, there is a grass which consumes sunlight, water and some minerals, and then the grass grows up, and then this grass is consumed by another living thing, that is a grasshopper. Grasshopper eats this grass and lives. Then this grasshopper, you can see this red arrow, that this grasshopper is eaten by this frog now. Now this grasshopper is a food for this frog. This frog is a food for a snake, means this frog is eaten by the snake. This snake is eaten by a hawk, an eagle, and then this eagle is decomposed and it gives birth to the fungi or mushrooms, and in the form, and then this all gives some then when it decomposes, it gives some nutrients to the grass again, and again the grass grows and the grasshopper eats it, and then frogs are fed on the grasshoppers, and then similarly this food chain begins. So this is food chain. So you can see in it the message that is given in this food chain, that there is one primary source and the rest of the animals and plants and the birds, they are depending on each other. Like frog is depending on grasshopper, snake is depending on frog, the eagle is depending on snake. So this is all like in a chain. So this is called a food chain. Now we will come towards the producer, that what the 3 types we discussed. The first one is producer. What is a producer? So it says that the green plants make their own food during photosynthesis. using energy from the sunlight. Any living thing that makes its own food is called the producer. Like green plants are therefore producers. So in short, the producers are the one which can make their own food. You will be thinking that humans are also producers, but you are wrong. Humans are not the producers because humans cannot produce their own food. They can cook the food, but they cannot produce the food. We are also depending on some others. So the one which can make their own food, just like the plants. Like plants make their own food by the process of photosynthesis. You know that photosynthesis need sunlight, and in the presence of sunlight, plants can make their own food and they can survive. So any living thing that can make its own food is called the producer. An example is the green plants. Furthermore, we say producers are the organisms that make their own food from a primary source such as sunlight. They are often called autotrophs or primary producers. They are at the start of the food chain. So again, this is some extra detail of the producer, that they are the one which can make their own food, and the primary source for the producers is the sunlight. If there is no sunlight, they cannot make their food, because plants make their food through the process of photosynthesis, and in the photosynthesis, if there is no sunlight, plants will not be able to make their food. The process of photosynthesis will not take place. So that is why the primary source for the producers is the sunlight, and in the presence of the sunlight they can make their own food. That is why they are called producers. And the other term that is used is the autotrophs, is similar to the primary source. Like sunlight is a primary source for the producer to make their food, or in other words we can say the sunlight is the autotroph for the producers. So they will always be, producers will be always at the first where the food chain will begin. If we are talking about the food chain, then the producer will be the first from where the food chain will begin. Then the second is the consumer. That who are the consumers? So we say animals that cannot make their own food. They must obtain their food by eating plants or the animals. The animals are called the consumer because they eat or consume other living things. Just like I told you earlier, that animals are the one which cannot make their own food. Just like humans, we can obtain our food by eating other plants and animals. So in the same way, animals cannot make their own food. They also obtain their food by eating plants and other animals. So these are called the consumers. And again, I will repeat the point that humans are consumers. We are not the producers. We can cook the food, but we cannot make our own food. So that is why humans are also consumers. So now there is further classification of the consumer. We say consumer is further classified into three types: herbivores, which is the primary consumer. Then is second one is the carnivores, that is the secondary consumer, and the third one is the omnivores. So discussing the three classification of the three types of the consumers, we have a picture here. You can see in the picture that there is a sunlight, and in the presence of sunlight there is a producer. Then this producer is eaten by the herbivore. Then this herbivore is eaten by the omnivore. Then this omnivore is taken by the carnivore, and this carnivore is taken by another carnivore. And then this carnivore is decomposed, and after decomposition it gives some nutrients to the producer again. And in the presence of the sunlight and the water, this producer is surviving again. So this is a food chain in which you can see how one living thing is depending on the other one.